Hello, I'm Oonagh Keogh from the Whistle Blast Quartet. I play the violin, and I just played a little bit of a piece by Bach there, who wrote a whole lot of sonatas and partitas for violin. And he wrote them back during the time when the violin really was invented into its form today. It hasn't really changed very much between the 16th century and nowadays. And it really was started in Italy in a place called Cremona, where three families were the most famous for making these violins. And those names are still with us today. I think most people have heard the name Stradivarius, and they're one of the most famous makers of all time. Also Guarnerius and Amati. They were the three families who were the famous ones whose violins have really survived to this day and are the most expensive. You can't really afford them at all these days. But the violin, it evolved from being an instrument where Bach wrote so many sonatas, and as you heard there when I played, it's a very, very simple, pure way of playing, which those composers like Bach and then Vivaldi, Corelli, they were the Baroque composers who played in a very, very pure, very simple style, and there was no interference in it, as you can hear when I play. The notes just were let ring out, and there was nothing like the way you hear it played today in a lot of the more romantic and modern music. That developed later when composers such as Brahms and then later again Shostakovich would write a lot of music which was really passionate and warm, and we use a technique called vibrato. This is what it sounds like. So as you can hear, you're basically wobbling your finger to give more depth and more breadth to the whole sound. And it just gives an awful lot of, I suppose, intensity of feeling to the music. But we still play in the more simple style today when we play Bach. We don't necessarily put this vibrato onto all types of music, which is interesting because it's a very versatile instrument, the violin. You can play it in a very beautiful, simple style. You can play it like this with a lot of warm vibrato. It's the kind of instrument that can be played very quietly and very, very melodically. And then it can be incredibly dramatic and very loud. There's a famous piece by a composer called Monti, who was Italian, and he wrote a piece called Czardas, which I think a lot of people have heard of, and part of it goes like this. So as you can hear, it can be very virtuosic. It's really the style of violin writing developed and was made into a real show instrument. And there were many, many concertos written for it. So I think probably one of the most famous people who developed it as being such a showy, offy instrument and the type that could stand out in front of an orchestra and be a solo instrument was Paganini. And he was an amazing fiddle player, and nobody could play the way he did in the day, so that people thought that he was actually possessed by the devil. This was, they really believed this because he would get up on stage and do all these amazing virtuosic tricks which had never been seen before. So that was the way the violin was going into being this really dramatic instrument. But still, we can keep things very quiet. We can keep things very, very melodic. And one beautiful piece that I know on the violin uses this little thing called a mute, which makes it very, very soft. So it's the perfect instrument for playing a lullaby. And this is a little Swiss lullaby. So just to give you an idea of the different sound quality that you can get. So you can see it really can draw you in as well. So that's why I love the violin. I have been playing the violin since I was 6 years of age, and I never get tired of it because there's just so many different ways you can play it, so many different styles. You can play classical, you can play jazz, you can play a bit of trad. I love my violin, and I I'm never going to part with it. So I hope you've learned something today about the violin, and go off and buy yourself one and learn. It's great fun.